ladies and gentlemen, or hey guys, and basically, let's just get into it. This is What If Daku Was Eternal, Part 1, guys. Now, a couple weeks ago, I think, no, a week ago, I saw the Eternals movie. It was a fire movie, one of the best MCU movies. My parents didn't like it that much, probably most likely because they didn't get it, or they didn't, know what was going on in the movie. But it was a really good movie, really good plot, pretty, top tier. At the same level as the most classic ones. But basically, guys, let's start into the What If. Now, basically, this What If, by the time I'm recording this, it's Sunday. So next week on Monday or Tuesday, I'm gonna be uploading this. So I'm just gonna be recording it early. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and let's just get into it. Now I'm doing this outside because gotta have that sunlight in your life. Basically, yeah. So you might hear a change in the audio because the other half of this video I might record it inside. But yeah, so hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and let's just dive right on in. Let's start our story off with Izuku Midoriya and how he would become, or how he is going to be eternal. We start our story off centuries, thousands of years before Earth was even thought of or even created. Now basically, we switch thousands of years ago when the Earth has, not really came to a point where the Earth is being destroyed by humanity. Just, Earth filled with animals and dinosaurs and creatures like those. We start our story off with basically the Eternals, and how the Eternals would be similar. But in this world, the Eternals would have been made to basically, multiple other looks. And basically, the Icarus in this universe would be similar to another person in My Hero universe, All Might. Now, basically, Icarus, or the All Might in this universe, would basically be a little bit more of a Captain America or Superman built type of hero. So he wouldn't be all bulky and huge like the original All Might, but he would be a little bit more, Superman-esque built. Him not being all bulky and Hulk-like. All Might would be more built like Superman. Not as, bulky, but more bodybuilder-esque. Like more, realistic type of body build. Kind of like Superman from the comics. Like Superman from the comics. Kind of like that. So basically, the Icarus in this universe would be All Might. Now, All Might would have had his muscle form as well, but his skinny form would still be a more muscular form, similar to Superman's physique. Now, basically, the Eternals would be made, or would have been made by the Celestials. When in this universe, they would be biological, meaning that they wouldn't be robots. Spoilers: they wouldn't be robots like in the movies. It would be, very, very huge, like fancy androids, or pretty much, androids or whatever. But basically, we see in this universe, when the Eternals are living their lives, basically, they would have been made a little bit different. Daku being added to the roster of the Eternals after the first batch of Eternals were made. Now, the Eternals would go on to have lives, have families, Thanos, and all those other creatures involved, all those other, people involving the Eternals. That, all the other creatures that involve the Eternals would be in the My Hero universe as, like, Thanos and Star Fox. Now, basically, Thanos and Star Fox or the other Celestials would be a big, part of this story, but mainly would be focusing on Deku and how he would come to be, and how he would see humanity. We skip a couple of 100 years, probably like 1,000 years later, and basically after the Eternals, their history goes the same. Makari, Icarus, Cersei, all those other Eternals are still made. Icarus just looking a little bit different, him having the same personality, him having a little bit of All Might personality a little bit. Now basically, Icarus and the Celestials would come to Earth. Now basically, they would be there to basically deal with, deviants. Now deviants would be brought on the world the same time as Earth. Earth's, deviants would be brought on the Earth. Basically, pretty much them going to their whole historically accurate thing. But in this universe, Druid would be replaced with, well, none other than Izuku Midoriya. Now basically, he would take his name as Izuku Druid. Druid. Basically something like that. Basically him being kind of fascinated with the Japanese culture of humanity. And basically we would switch to basically the main point where Deku's life would be changed. Now basically Deku, with his eternal abilities, he would be the son of the first wave of Eternals. Him join the main Eternals team, Cersei, Icarus, and, uh, Kingo, I guess his name was, and the others. Basically, he would have basically been more the thinker of the team, more thinking, and more of a type of mischievous one of the bunch. Him not being as mischievous as Sprite, but more, well, Loki-esque. Now, basically, Deku would have had a similar ability to Druid, him being able to control humans, but not control them completely. He'll be able to control their minds at a certain extent by, pretty much pushing certain thoughts on their brain to make them push towards their deepest, darkest thoughts, but not him being able to, straight up control them like puppets. Him being able to, whatever they're thinking about, him making them act on that. So if you're thinking about, I don't know, jumping off a bridge, he can make you act on that thought and make you subconsciously jump off that bridge. And basically, over time, right when the war was happening in the, My Hero world, the same war that happened when they had, they couldn't, they couldn't stop it since it was a war, and it was mass genocide. It was a fighting against the Egyptians, and it was a war, basically a tirade. Now, basically, Deku would see this, and he would see that it was just not what he wanted to see. It was something that should have been never created, that we should be able to stop things like this. So Deku used his abilities to act on the thoughts of the people that are there, but he saw that all the people's thoughts were to hide, not to fight back. They were all cowardice. Now Deku saw that they were a coward because they had nothing to fight back. They were human. They knew they could die. So Deku thought about this, and he said, enough is enough. He jumps off, he's about to jump off the balcony to stop the war, but Cersei tells him to stop, including Ikari. Now he tells them to back off, saying, the only way you can stop me is to kill me. And he jumps off the edge. Now basically, Deku's abilities would be very different than Druid or any other Sea Astral's abilities. His power would be, still the same base abilities of a Sea Astral: immortality, superhuman durability, strength, and regeneration. But his superhuman strength would be on the same level as Icarus' strength, but would have been about 1 times weaker. Meaning if they had like a full-on battle completely based off only strength and no tactical fight, he would lose. But since Deku was about the same amount of strength as, let's say, Omni-Man, basically he would be strong. But Icarus would be the same strength as, Kryptonian, because Kryptonians are stronger than Vultramites, but not as durable. They kind of are as durable as they kind of are more durable than Vultramites, but Deku would be the same strength as Vultramites. And also Deku would be able to fly as well, just like Icarus, but wouldn't be able to fly like Icarus, but he would be able to hover for a short amount of time, kind of like Magneto. Now basically, you'll see that pretty much Deku would have jumped off the edge, landing Superman style, and basically would have told them to stop. They would have saw this as, they wouldn't want to stop, so they started to fight against Deku, and Deku had to do something they never wanted to do in his life. He fought back, or he fought humans. He threw them around like rag dolls, punching holes through their chest, ripping them apart, basically showing off that he is a god to compare to them. They would have backed off and they would have surrendered, and the war would be ended just like that, in a matter of about 10 minutes. Now, Deku would have flown up towards the, pyramid, and would have told them that we are gods compared to these mortals. We can stop this. We can help them. We can get rid of their petty and unexcusable wars that just lead to violence and death. And basically, they would have looked at him and said, we can't interfere with human laws. And we can't interfere with what humans want to do. We can only interfere when deviants are involved. Now, Deku would have said deviants, it doesn't matter anymore. They're all dead. Our mission here may be done, but my mission isn't. And Deku tells them that I'm going to stop this. I'm going to end this. Now, basically, before Deku flew off to basically end this war and the havoc, basically, what would happen is basically they would have stopped Deku before he can go on this mission to, well, free the world or rule humanity to make sure no wars, no more deaths would happen. Basically, as they try to stop Deku, Deku will start to dodge most of their attacks. Basically, him almost getting overpowered by most of the rest of the team. Him mainly going after Icarus first, since he saw Icarus as the biggest threat, since Icarus is the only other Eternal that was stronger than Deku. Deku would have flown towards Icarus, grabbing him and throwing him into the ground, pretty much throwing him towards multiple mountains, rocks, and pretty much caverns all around the temple or all around the palace, and then being miles away from the palace at this point. Basically, them throwing punches, Goku and Vegeta style, across the sky, making shockwaves that would be able to pretty much be sensed by the Eternals miles away. And basically, as they're fighting over and over and over, thousands of times over, pretty much feeling like shockwaves or earthquakes were happening, them going all out. Basically, Icarus saying, I'm done playing your games, I'm done playing your games, Druid. Basically, Deku say my name is in Druid. It's Deku. Basically, him throwing Icarus into the ground, making about a 10-foot crater underneath Icarus. Icarus would have started to get barraged by laser vision, pretty much from Deku into his chest. Then pretty much Deku would have looked at pretty much, well, Icarus, and Icarus would have grabbed pretty much a huge rock and would have chucked it right at Deku's forehead, making Deku, get off of his target, Icarus, and basically Icarus would have flown towards Deku and would have grabbed him and thrown him into the ground. Deku would have fell into a crater, and basically Icarus would have said, enough is enough, stop this. Basically Deku getting up saying, make me. Him shooting a laser beam right towards Icarus before Icarus can even notice it. Icarus gets caught off guard and gets blasted into the Earth's atmosphere, him being knocked out for a couple minutes. Now basically you would see Deku would have flown towards multiple other of the Eternals, trying to stop them from stopping him. Basically him easily taking down pretty much, well, the engineer of the Eternals. I think his name was Porcius. I don't know his name. But he would be, folded alongside Kingo, would have hit up a good fight against Deku. But Deku would have grabbed Kingo and thrown him down to the ground, knocking him out. Now, pretty much Makari and Cersei, and pretty much Makari, Cersei, and what was it? Makari, Cersei, and I think and Ajax, Makari, and also Cersei would have pinned up, a last fighting straw against Deku. Now Deku was trying to fight against them, basically him mainly trying to tell Makari to let him, do this. Basically, Makari would have told Deku, you have to stop this. Now in this universe, pretty much, well, Makari would have been Deku's love interest for this what if. Now basically, Makari would have looked a little bit different. Basically, this version of Makari looking exactly like a spitting image of Mirako. Now basically, Mirako, or this version of Makari that looked like Mirako, with the same hair without the bunny ears and the bunny legs though. Basically, her just looking like, well, she would have still had the bunny type of design, but she would have had, pretty much a white version of her red suit. Basically, her fighting up against Deku. Now, basically, she would have told Deku to stop this. I don't want to hurt you. And Deku saying the same thing. Him grabbing the ground behind him, pretty much making himself into like a human wall, pushing Makari back, and basically telling Makari to stay down. Basically, Makari saying, I can't do that. Deku would have looked at her and would have said, sorry. Basically, him throwing her into a mountain, knocking her out. And basically, Deku would have flown towards pretty much Ajax, and Ajax would have tried to fight back against Deku, but Ajax would be a healer. She wouldn't really be as strong as Deku. Now Deku would have grabbed pretty much Ajax's punch and basically would have looked at her saying, "I'm sorry, you were a friend." Basically, him throwing Ajax into the ground and knocking her out. Now he would look at Cersei, and Cersei would have told him, "I don't want to do this." Basically, him saying, "You have no choice." Basically, him flying towards Cersei, pretty much grabbing her by the neck. Basically, him not knowing his own strength, him about to snap, pretty much Cersei's neck. So Cersei, in the last, fit of, well, straight up adrenaline, she would have grabbed Deku's chest and would have turned him into solid ice. Basically, him going into kind of a dream state coma. Now, the Eternals will slowly wake up, Icarus flying down to the ground, and him looking at Deku's ice statue. Now, basically, Icarus was about to punch the statue, but basically, Cersei would have stopped him, saying that we don't want to kill him. We have to just keep him like this. Now, they would put him in corner like a middle prison and would have sent him in the deepest, darkest depths of the ocean in the Arctic Circle or in the North Pole, deep into the ocean. And basically, it was said pretty much after that, the Earth's history would go the same as in the history of My Hero Academia. And basically, Kirk's coming into the universe, and Sinestro seeing this, and basically telling the Eternals that they had a green light of interfering with humanity's, torfays, or pretty much humanity's pretty much scrabbles as a hero. Now, basically, the Eternals would have been told to well, introduce yourselves to humanity as heroes, not Eternals. So basically, they would introduce themselves as heroes, and Icarus would have took up the mantle of All Might, alongside Cersei and pretty much Makari being the same number hero as Miracle. Basically, here replacing Miracle in this universe. Miracle not existing because Miracle would basically just be Makari. Sorry, guys. So that was my dog. Sorry. So we continue our story basically with pretty much Deku. Well, or was it Icarus and all the other pretty much Eternals becoming pro heroes. Basically, multiple of the Eternals looking like, well, original My Hero characters. So basically, it pretty much skipped a couple thousand years later after Quirks, became all, there. The pretty much the Eternals became pro heroes and had, pretty much a good life. Became heroes and pretty much in this world, pretty much, Icarus would have still looked like him, his normal self. Or basically, pretty much All Might looking kind of like Icarus, him having the same hero costume as Icarus, but not as MCU Icarus, the comic book outfit that Icarus had in the comics, kind of like this. So basically we see pretty much Deku. We see Deku see this, and basically Deku would have seen this, and basically no, not Deku. Pretty much Eternals would have became pro heroes, would have became really loved heroes, and would have saved the world or saved cities multiple times over. Now basically, pretty much we could switch a couple years, but the same year that Deku was supposed to be born, or Deku was supposed to be canonically born. In this universe, pretty much Inka Midoriya in this universe and Asashi wouldn't have a child. They would just have a normal marriage, and they would have a baby girl instead of a baby boy. Basically, that baby girl being basically the female version of Deku. Now, basically, that female version of Deku would be born with a quirk, blah, blah, blah. She would go to UA, blah, 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 all that other stuff. Or she would be born. And basically, the second she is born, Druid, or Deku, made his way to break out of the ice sculpture. And he didn't break out, but pretty much a couple of scuba divers came across a very weird-looking, pretty much temple, or middle temple, and also a middle coffin inside the temple. They would have dragged it out. Basically, most of the internet going crazy about how it was a middle black coffin in the deep ocean of Antarctica. And basically, we would say pretty much everybody, or the scientists, would have tried to open the coffin, seeing that it was very tight, like from 1,000 suns type of heat. Basically, the middle being forged together like it was no other middle on the face of the earth. They had to call some pro heroes to open it up. One pro hero was able to open it up, basically Killer Will or that well pro hero, basically them being able to open it up, and them seeing an ice sculpture looking like Deku. Basically, they would have put it out saying an ice sculpture. This is interesting. Basically, them being confused on why it's not melting, since it's been in the coffin for a couple days after it got taken out of the water, the freezing cold water. Basically, pretty much we would say that pretty much Deku would have seen that the ice was slightly melting and was giving Deku a little bit of leverage to break out of it. Now Deku would have sensed that his chance was here. Now pretty much Deku would be in a pretty much a glass freezer, basically being up for display at a museum with his iron coffin right next to the glass display where his ice sculpture or his body is. And basically he would have started to crack out of the ice sculpture by the time of weeks. As the canon or the female version of Deku, and that female version of Deku will not be relative to the story at all. So I'm just gonna tell you like how Deku's life's gonna go. Basically, gonna go exactly the same, or not exactly the same, since All Might doesn't exist in this universe since Icarus has taken his place. Basically, this version of female Deku, she would be born with a quirk with pyrokinesis, and she would be going to UA blah blah blah. And basically, pretty much that version of her, she would not get into UA, but she would get into another pro hero school. The same school where the same school where that what was it? I think that guy with the whole entire Quaker powers that look like Deku and Canon, the whole entire, hero course license exam. They basically pretty much see Deku break out of the ice sculpture one night in the museum, him breaking it from the inside, it not pretty much sensing off a sensor, since if it's broken or open from the inside, it wouldn't make sense to put a sensor there or make it go off or alarm. Pretty much Deku would have walked out of his ice sculpture, his ice prison, and basically would have looked around, breathing fresh air from, first time in 1,000 years, and basically him walking around. Now he would be still in his like Egyptian type or his eternal clothes and his eternal armor, or you know his eternal armor or suit would look similar like Deku's eternal suit would look the equivalent of the MCU version of Icarus' suit, just more of the gold, or more of the blue replaced with the green and gold. Now basically, it was no, yeah, he would have basically the same suit as the MCU version of Icarus. Basically, the rest of the Eternals having their same MCU look, except for the Icarus in this universe having pretty much a more MCU styled version, way more realistic to his comic book version of his suit. So yeah. So basically, we see Deku walk towards the museum, him looking at the history, and basically him coming across pretty much a guard. Now basically, he would take in the guard pretty quickly, just smacking him side the head, knocking him out. Basically, him picking up the guard's phone, trying to figure out how it works. Basically, he would peer into the pretty much guard's thoughts. Basically, Deku would be able to, impulse people with memories, but he would also impulse people with thoughts, but he would also be able to look through people's memories. So he would look through the security guard's memories and would have found out a lot about the future, or a lot about this time. Basically, he would go around out of the museum, him flying towards the sunroof in the museum and flying out of it, and him pretty much walking around towards the city. And basically, you see that his suit was bringing a lot of attention, and a lot of people thought he was a pro hero, basically trying to get pictures with him. And basically, Deku would have gladly, agreed. Then him thinking that they just thought, he was their favorite, god or eternal. Now, basically, he would have started to walk around, and basically, word of a green-haired pro hero with a type of, really Egyptian-like suit, basically would come to here with Makari. And basically, Makari would have gone down to Japan and basically would have looked down, looked around, basically trying to look for Deku. Her knowing how Deku looked when he was frozen. And basically, she would pretty much run towards a corner and would have bumped into Deku. Her looking at Deku and saying, "I can't believe it. You're awake." Basically, he would have said, "Yeah, I am." Basically, he would have looked at Mirko or Makari and would have kissed her immediately, saying, "It's been a long time." And basically, she would have said, "You're not mad." Basically, I'm saying, I've been in that coffin for thousands of years. Being mad just seems like an afterthought now. But basically, pretty much, she, embraces Deku back, and basically, they, pretty much, well, let's just say they spend a night together. And basically, pretty much, after that, Deku wakes up the next day, and basically looks around. And basically, Deku gets back into his Eternal's attire, and basically is about to walk out, but Makari stops her, telling him that basically, well, you can't just go out in public like that. Basically, Deku says, "Why not?" At this point, Deku would look like more of a 19 or a 20-year-old version of his canon self. Basically, him being a little bit more taller and a little bit more muscular. Like straight up, let's say Spider-Man type of muscular, like straight up amazing Spider-Man type of muscular, ripped, not jacked, but ripped. Now, basically, let's see, pretty much Deku would have looked at her saying, "Okay, so what should we do?" Now, basically, pretty much he says, "You wanna go shopping?" Basically, him saying shopping. Now, basically, they would have went to the mall. Basically, him saying, "I got some memories of a man about the mall." Basically, she would have said, "I'll teach you as much as you can." Now, we skip a couple weeks, and pretty much this would be about the same time as the. We skip a couple weeks, and basically, we see pretty much this would be about like a year before the canon or the canon female version of Deku would go to pretty much middle school. Well, not middle school, but like pretty much, I think, yeah, middle school. And basically, we say pretty much Deku would have, well, still been training. Him not really needing that much training since his body is literally physically like a god, like chiseled. But basically, we say pretty much Deku over time would pretty much admire more about humanity. And basically, we see that humanity has just thrived since, what would we say, quirks would come into the world. And basically, Deku would admire quirks, would admire that how humanity saved itself, that he didn't really need to interfere that much. Now, Deku would have gone with his life, would have gone pretty much years past, and Deku would have, well, rekindled his relationship with Makari, and they would have had a more stronger relationship. Basically, them going on multiple dates and multiple other things as well. Basically, Deku would have said, "I decided one night on, pretty much a cliff, since they were on the cliff, where they're on a mountain, on pretty much basically, the rain there or flying there. That basically, we see pretty much Deku would have told Makari, basically saying that, well, it's been nice being here for a couple of years on Earth. Basically, we're saying, what are you gonna leave? Basically, him saying, no, 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 not yet. Not at least for a couple of years. Basically, he would have said, "I think I want to be a pro hero." Basically, Makari would have said, "You gotta go to, hero school for that." And basically, Deku would have said, "Hero school." Or pretty much, he would have, heard about hero school. And they, pretty much, Makari would have gave her his phone. Gave him his phone. Her phone. Basically, him grabbing the phone and looking up the, hero school, like UA and the multiple other hero academies and stuff like that. Him saying, "So I gotta go to this school for a couple of years and get my license to be a pro hero, and then I can do all the hero stuff you and, well, the rest do." Basically, he would have also said, after years, he would never really mention this, but he would have said, finally, after a couple of years, saying, "Where is Icarus?" Basically, she would have said, "I'm not really in touch with him anymore." Basically, him saying, "So, same question, where is Cersei?" Basically, she would have said, "I'm not in touch with Cersei, only with Kingo, and a little bit I go on some, what was it? Sometimes I go out with my friends alongside Sprite, but that's it. Sprite and Kingo are the only ones I'm still in touch with." And basically, she pretty much Deku would have said, "Okay, I believe you." And basically, he would started to look around, basically being kind of, pretty much admiring Earth's humanity and how they thrived a little bit after he, well, was in hibernation, or like was trapped for a couple thousand years, for a couple centuries. And basically, Deku would have told Mikari, let's go back home. Basically, them running back home, Deku mimicking her powers like he did the rest of the Eternals. Now, basically, I forgot to mention this. If I did mention this, I don't remember. Basically, Deku has a type of extra power. He can basically mimic other Eternals' abilities, but every time he mimics another Eternal's abilities, it gets about 1 times weaker, meaning that he's not as fast as Mikari if she goes all out, but he is fast enough to keep up with her. And, all the other Eternals, the same thing with Eternals' powers. And basically, pretty much Deku would have pretty much, well, flown down to their house. Basically, them living in a pretty big type of mansion type penthouse. Since Deku did, think about human riches before he was hibernated, or before he was taken, or before he was trapped. Basically, him having a very ancient temple somewhere, him having a really big, like a whole casket filled with straight up just, well, money, gold, jewels, gems, diamonds. Then basically cashing them in alongside the money and the income Mirko or Mikari makes. Basically, them being stinking. I mean, straight up rich. I mean, like rich, rich. Now, basically, pretty much they would live in a really big mansion, like a huge mansion, kind of like a palace. Basically, them, living there for a couple years, and then, their relationship becoming even stronger than it was 1,000 years ago. And basically, as we do this, we switch a couple months later, a couple years later, and we come to the 10-month arc training. Basically, a couple days before the 10-month arc training, or a day before. Deku was walking down the streets, basically in some civilian clothes, in like a black shirt and gray shorts with gray or was black high top Vans, and him having 2 wristbands on, him on his phone. Basically, Deku would walk down the street, basically looking around, and he would see basically, well, a lot of commotion. Him seeing, well, the pro heroes all circle around trying to stop the such villain from suffocating this kid, Bakugo. And the other green haired girl would jump in trying to save Bakugo. And basically we see this. And Deku would have seen this basically in this version, pretty much Icarus showing up and stopping the situation and saving the girl and the boy, and also taking down the sludge villain pretty quickly with his laser vision. Basically, Icarus being praised, and multiple people try to get his, pretty much picture. And basically, we see Deku would have watched this and would have seen this, and he would have backed off into the shadows. Before Deku can back off, Icarus would recognize Deku. Icarus would follow Deku to his house, to his big house, and basically would have floated into the main, like, pool, or like their huge pool in the back. Basically, looking at Deku and saying, "Huh, you're awake." Now, basically, he would have looked at Icarus and said, "What do you want? You want to trap me again?" Basically, both of their eyes glowing. Basically, them being interrupted by Cersei and Mikari. And Cersei and Mikari were basically, having a drink in the pretty much living room. Now, basically, or one of the many living rooms in the house. And basically, it pretty much they would have stopped the situation and they would start to talk. Basically, Deku says, "I'm done talking," and basically gets up to go to sleep. Basically, he wakes up with Mikari next to him, and basically he says, "So, how do I sign up for hero school?" That basically Deku, will look like he was an adult, but he could pass as a 19 or 18-year-old. Now, basically, Deku pretty much, well, used a little bit of power, since he did see, pretty much Sprite use her illusion to make herself look older and stuff like that. So basically, Deku used his ability to use the mimicking ability he had from pretty much the power he mimicked from Sprite, him being able to pretty much mimic the illusion of him looking like a 16-year-old instead of a 20-year-old or 19-year-old like he originally looked like. Now, basically, Deku would have mimicked the look like this, and basically Mikari would have said, "Cool," and pretty much she would have said, "So, what school are you signing up for?" Basically, he would have said, UA. Yeah, basically, pretty much they would have trained. Basically, they're not really trained as hard since, they mainly trained on how Deku could hold back, since Deku was technically a god compared to every other person with a quirk. Basically, him, you know, being able to go up against pretty much anybody with a quirk, especially one for all. Basically, or all for one for all. Yeah, basically, we say pretty much. I mean, all for one. Basically, we see pretty much Deku go and pretty much spend time, or pretty much spend time with Makari the last 3 months. You know, them doing the Devil's Tango multiple times throughout the weeks. And basically, he would have, got ready to go to UA. He was using his illusion powers to basically look like, make himself look like 16. Now, he would have gone to UA, the entry exams, and let's just speed blitz through this whole entire thing. The reading exam he gets pretty good at since, years of him, being that smart and him being an eternal. And for the pretty much physical exam, what would happen? Long story short, Deku uses powers to basically just speed blitz towards the whole exam, pretty much flying through multiple robots, lasering them down, and pretty much throwing robots left and right. Basically, him getting a pretty good doing the entry exams. Deku just breezes through it really fast, incredibly fast, basically going through all the robots in a matter of minutes. Him eventually coming to the 0 point robot and him flying right through it. Now, guys, this might be a big jump because I did time jump from 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago, I did a big time jump, because I started recording this on Sunday last week. Sunday, I think the 12th or the 14th. Now, basically, guys, the day, I think it's the 16th, and I'm finishing this recording. So, after this video is uploaded, I'm going to start, whatever. Enough, because it's a huge time gap. And basically, just get into it, guys. Now, basically, pretty much after Deku defeats a 0 point robot after he sees Ochako about to get stomped, he does a heroic act since, Deku did help save people since, most of the Eternals helped save people during the whole time, them fighting up against the Deviants, stuff like that. So basically, he flew into the 0 point robot, flying through it, and basically, going right through the 0 pointer, taking it down in a matter of minutes. He flies down to the ground, basically, him, pretty much what was it? Him basically jumping off with a 0 pointer. Now, basically, he would have helped pretty much Ochaku up and basically saying, "Are you okay?" Her kind of getting a crush on Deku. And Deku still looks, or Deku pretty much still with his illusion mimicking power, he looks 16, but technically in actuality he's thousands of years old. But in real life, his eternal looks are 20 or 19 or 18. The lowest Deku can go with his age without the illusion is probably like 18 in human years. Now, basically, pretty much Deku, helps her up and pretty much takes her to the recovery girl after she got her leg stuck in some rubble. Now, basically, Deku flies back off, like for straight up Superman style, trying to get more robots down. Now, over time, he starts levitating closer to the ground so he can't full on fly like Icarus, but he can levitate for a short amount of time, giving the illusion off on like actual flight. Or basically, bit of playing, he could just fly for a short amount of time. And basically, we see Deku basically go up against more robots, throwing them around like ragdolls. Eventually, the timer or the siren goes off, and they're all sent back home and, wait for their pretty much results. Now, Deku gets a note from UA after a couple days spending with pretty much Makari or Mirko. I might say Mirko or Makari, either way. Basically, they're the same person in this universe. Now, basically, pretty much see Deku get the note from UA, and he gets in. Basically, Deku tells Makari, and Makari says that's pretty good. And basically, her saying, "You want me to drive you to your first day?" Basically, him saying, "No, I got it." Basically, him pretty much, levitating to, or straight up, temporarily flying to UA, pretty much stealth like, using a little bit of illusion magic to make himself invisible so he won't get caught from people that, pretty much, or the police for him using his quirk without a, license. And basically, we see Deku fly down to the ground, and basically him unillusioning himself or making himself visible again, and basically him walking in the class 1A. He walks in the class 1A, and basically, pretty much, he walks in the class 1A, And basically, he walks in class one day, and pretty much he gets, or just sits down, pretty much neck behind Bakugo and a couple other students, basically in the same row as seats Bakugo's in. He sits there, basically him still having his illusion magic on par, or his mimicking illusion power to make himself look 16. And basically, this whole time illusion magic he does is basically going to be in full effect all the time, so he's going to be holding back or using most of his power to go to the point of him looking 16. So yeah. So basically, pretty much also, guys, I forgot to mention this. Pretty much since in this universe, Celestials caused quirks to happen and activated them, making the human world evolve. On top of that, basically, deviants are kind of a result of quirks. Since quirks come from Celestials and deviants and Eternals come from Celestials, their power sets are similar or their energy is from the same type of plane or power set as other beings from the Celestials, meaning that in theory, a strong quirk could, well, actually damage a Eternal. That's why pro heroes that are Eternals actually have some trouble going up against, villains, because most villains have a little bit more of a pretty much a deviant gene in their quirk. Basically, any person with a mutation, pretty much, a mutation quirk is actually has more deviant genes than pretty much eternal genes that give them their quirk. Basically, pretty much like Tokiyami or or I think Zero. I don't know, the guy with the tail. Basically, they have a more deviant type of powers. Deviant type of, what was it? Not powers, but strength. Basically, since deviants have been able to, straight up attack and actually damage and cut and actually kill Eternals. Basically, yeah, so Deku actually, I'm gonna make him to OP since he would also be able to he also will be holding back to keep the illusion up, and also on top of that, other quirks could actually damage Celestials, meaning, I know not Celestials, I mean Eternals. So basically, quirks can damage Eternals if they're strong enough. Like Todoroki's powers, he could slightly damage an Eternal, but not to the extent of killing an Eternal like a full Deviant could. Basically, people with mutation quirks have more of a chance of taking down an Eternal than anybody that has a weak emitter quirk. Now, people with strong emitter quirks like Endeavor or All Might could actually go up against a pretty much Eternal, but in this universe, All Might doesn't exist since Icarus takes the mantle of All Might in this universe. But basically, pretty much we see pretty much, well, Deku start to get more acquainted with pretty much his peers, talking to them, and basically him, just spending just spending time with them. Now eventually, pretty much Zawa pretty much tells everybody to get ready to go outside, so they're gonna do quirk assessments. Basically, they go outside and pretty much Deku's to the throw the ball first since he got the highest score. Now, since Deku doesn't know Bakugo and Bakugo doesn't even know Deku, Bakugo ain't that mad about Deku being, having a quirk. Deku grabs the ball and chucks it out of the atmosphere into the sun. And basically, Izawa being shocked, and also the rest of the students being over, like, just straight up be like, how did he even do that? Like, everybody just gawking at Deku. Now, pretty much the rest of the students, and they do the long jump, the sand pit. Basically, Deku levitates over it, jumping over it pretty quickly. The race, Deku aces it, and pretty much for an extra, what was it? No, the grip test strength, Deku aces it, perfectly, actually breaking the machine. And pretty much, Deku gets first place. Bakugo's kind of angry and says, "Who do you think you are?" Basically, him throwing an explosion that Deku put him in his place or whatever. Basically, thinking Deku's just a side character. Now, pretty much, Deku scoffs the explosion away, saying, "Really?" And he flicks Bakugo in the chest. Bakugo not thinking he was gonna hurt or anything since it was a small flick. But since Deku is eternal and also he's incredibly strong, he sends Bakugo flying 8 feet away. Basically, Bakugo falling down on his face, and pretty much the whole class, chuckling, and pretty much Zawa not really caring since he saw, Bakugo hit Deku first. So he just, didn't want to do the paperwork and he didn't want to talk at them since he already want to leave because it's the end of the day. So yeah. So basically, after that, we see them go back home, and Deku flies back to the mansion or the place where he lives with Mirko or Bakari. And basically, Basically, Deku, arrives at the house, basically in an outfit similar to this. Him doing an outfit change, him doing an outfit change. Basically, you see pretty much Deku walk into the house, and basically him getting greeted by Mirko, hugging him, and blah blah blah. Him, you know, making the illusion go away. Him looking like his normal eternal age self. Him looking like he's 20 or 19 years old. Basically, we see pretty much Deku and Mirko. Well, wasn't not was it? They pretty much watch a movie, blah blah, spend some time together. And basically, as they're doing this, Deku is a noise in the back of the house. He goes to check on it, and Mirko doesn't really think of it. Pretty much Makari or Mirko doesn't really think of it that much. Now, and basically, what would happen is pretty much Deku would have went into the backyard, looking around, and he would hear growling or some sort of screeching. He looked behind him, and he would see a huge type of mammoth of a monster, a eternal, a deviant, a deviant. Hasn't seen deviants in years. He backs up, basically in a fighting position, and him being confused with what's going on. He gets thrown a punch, and Deku dodges it, pretty much shooting a laser beam towards the Eternal, but the Eternal grabs Deku by the chest and throws him around across the yard, or across the backyard. Basically, him falling into a grill and pretty much crushing it underneath him. Now, he would have grabbed the grill's with the top of the grill, using it as a shield, and thrown it Captain America style through the Deviant. The Deviant would have get wounded, but it would have started to heal itself, kind of like Ajax, and Deku being incredibly confused. The Eternal would have flown up into the sky, him being confused on why the Eternal can even fly, and he follows the Eternal up into the sky. I mean, not the Eternal, the Deviant. The Deviant grabs Deku and starts to try to put some sort of spikes or some sort of tubes into Deku's body, trying to pretty much take his powers. Deku fights back, shooting laser beam into the Deviant's chest. Basically, the Deviant screeching out in pain and flying away, dropping Deku. Deku would have flown safely and landed, and Makari would have heard this and rushed towards Deku, basically asking what was going on. Deku would have said, "I don't know," and basically, he would see pretty much the Eternal fly away. Now, the Eternal wouldn't be fly like an Eternal, it would just the Deviant. Sorry, guys, the Deviant wouldn't be able to fly like an Eternal. It would just have bat-like wings. So yeah, it won't be able to fly like levitate, but like it'll have bat-like wings. That basically you would fly away, and pretty much Deku was confused. Pretty much, he would pretty much heal a couple days. He would heal in a couple hours. Basically, the wounds on his body after he tried to put its spikes into Deku's chest and take his powers. Basically, Deku was confused on what was going on. He tried to pretty much contact Ajax, since Makari did have Ajax's old number from like the 1980s or something. Basically, they would try to call Ajax, and Ajax would surprisingly not pick up, since pretty much, well, Makari called her a couple weeks later, but she answered and she seemed fine. Now, she would go back to Ajax's house, also calling the rest of the Eternals that she had contact with, like basically Sprite and also, what was it? Sprite and also Kingo. Basically, they would go to her house and they would see that her body was in the backyard, and she would be in the same state as spoilers, the MCU, pretty much Ajax's dead body. Now, basically, they would be shocked, and Deku would have been angered, shooting a laser beam in the sky, yelling out who could have done this. What? It was that. Basically, him saying it was the thing that attacked me. It has the same marks that it had on me. Basically, him looking at the marks on Ajax's body, it having stab wounds, and the same spike, pretty much wounds that he had on his body after he, escaped from the clutches of the pretty much And basically, what would happen is pretty much Deku would have been yelling out, and pretty much they would have tried to pretty much after that, Deku and pretty much the rest of the Eternals, they would have basically what would happen is pretty much Deku would have or the rest of the Eternals would have walked away and pretty much would have made a proper burial ground for Ajax, since Ajax was a pro hero. And basically, she got a funeral and all the other stuff, and basically Deku was there for the funeral. And basically, for just plot sake, basically The second day of UA would have been canceled for some unknown reason, like the principal was like out or something, or like the school had some sort of plumbing problem or something, so the school was out for the second day. So basically, it would be a free day for the students, and Deku would have gone to the funeral for Ajax. Now, pretty much all the Eternals will be there, including multiple other pretty much heroes that spend time with Ajax that, also pretty much worked alongside Ajax. Now, basically, what happened right there is Deku had been filled with rage and pure, well, vengeance. He wanted to find the Eternal that did this to him. The deviant that did this to her. Now, pretty much after that, pretty much Deku would have gone back home with Mikari and basically want to spend the night with her. Now, basically, next day, we open, our eyes to a fresh new Deku. Not a fresh new Deku, but pretty much Deku for pretty much the second day of UA. Now, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm going to leave it off here. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and as always, guys, have a blessed day. Before I go, pretty much, guys, go in the comments part 2. Should I make Deku a little bit more? Should I make Deku, or should I make the Deviant kill Ajax, or should I do it like the MCU spoilers? Icarus killed Ajax because of the whole entire, pretty much, Siestro being born on the Earth. Should I do that? Either way, guys. Yeah. So basically, guys, I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and see you guys later.